Many new players are flocking to Dungeons & Dragons thanks in large part to excellently recorded campaigns such as the infamous Critical Role. But what makes these programs so great and compared to your average everyday session is role-playing, or the ability to embody your character and the choices that they would make. In this video, I'm going to be giving you quick tips to building out your role-playing tool belt so that you can create more engaging sessions for both yourself, your Dungeon Master, and perhaps even one day an audience. Let's start by looking at the basics of roleplay and closely looking at what makes certain people so good at it. And no, it's not the ability to do 40 different accents. Good roleplay starts before even the first session begins, and that's with a thought-out character backstory. It's pretty hard to play a person that you've never even heard of before, and Dungeons & Dragons is no different. Playing a character without a backstory is like showing up to a movie set with no script and no idea who you're going to play. It doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying you have to write a novel before your first session, and hell, the story doesn't even have to be original. But what you do need is some idea of what's important to your character, what made them into the person they are today, and all of this will help you with the development of a background. Now, 5th edition in particular actually has a system that helps us out a little bit with this, as they have their own list of backgrounds, ideals, bonds, and flaws to help you flesh out your character. However, I found that this system is kind of vague and can't be used in isolation to develop out your character, and rather should be used to add in a couple extra details that you may not have thought of on your own. Now, backstories are dynamic, and it may take the first couple of sessions to kind of feel out your character to help you develop it along the way. So like I said before, you do not need to have every single detail nailed down before you start a session. Some important questions for you to answer beforehand are, what in your character's life led up to them choosing their class? How does your character's race interact with your chosen setting? And what specifically is motivating your character to be a part of this party and a part of this story? This last question is particularly important to answer before starting your session, as the Dungeon Master can use these different motivations and ideas to build out your character further and create character-specific story moments and interactions so that your character isn't just some person that's along for the ride that lives in isolation and exists in a void. If you found yourself extremely pressed for time before your first session, or all of this is already too overwhelming for you, a quick and easy way to start developing a character for me is to just list adjectives. Take a human barbarian, for example. I'd say he's big, he's loud, he's brash, he's loyal, but he's violent. That gives you enough basic foundation to just tell your Dungeon Master how you should be interacting with other players, NPCs, and how NPCs should be interacting with you. And the rest of the details can kind of be filled out later as you continue to play the character. Once you've got these first initial details nailed down, be sure to send them to your Dungeon Master before the first session. All of these different details, background stories, and motivations can be used to create new and exclusive content to your character, even if you're playing a pre-written campaign, as there are always opportunities to tie in character-specific moments and characters that didn't originally exist, but they can't unless you tell them about it. Once you have a basic skeleton of who your character is mapped out, you can start playing the game and allowing your character to develop naturally through your role-playing them yourself. Role-playing can be a lot like doing improv, so one of the most important things should be that no one critique each other or their attempts at role-playing, especially at the beginning. This can be really important at the start of the campaign because it is super easy to get out of the habit of role-playing and just playing them as if you were in a video game. Everyone should be attempting to talk in character as much as possible and discussing what's going on in the campaign in character as well. Conversations between players is often the most engaging and rewarding part of a campaign, and when done in character, it can maximize those moments of interplayer relationships and bring new and exciting ideas that they may not have thought of unless they were doing it in character. It's because of this that I am against the popular idea of everyone introducing themselves around a Dungeons & Dragons table in an AA-style fashion during a first session. Have this conversation between your characters in character as it seems to naturally occur, which will allow your own character to think about how he would react to this information and how he would treat this character, rather than just knowing that Alex is playing a level 7 bard. Not to harp, but I do think that Critical Role does this extremely successfully. The characters almost always refer to each other as their in-game characters, and frequently talk about events that we, the audience, just saw, but the other characters in the party wouldn't know about in their real in-game role-playing selves. They have these conversations naturally, and it leads to a much more entertaining, funny, and dynamic story. The next quick tip I can give you is that the game goes best when every character looks for a way to actively help each other with their role-playing. This means not only mechanically by not interrupting each other or trying to speak over each other, but also keeping an eye out for quiet players or players who may be struggling with role-playing more than you. The best way to engage someone is by taking a moment to let that character shine, and you can do this even if you're not the Dungeon Master. Do scenes specifically where that character is asked about something. If you are personally asked about someone, but know that the other character hasn't been speaking much, ask their opinion of them, and reward them when they do something great or succeed really well. Do scenes where that character who may be a little more shy is asked specifically about their background in a story kind of way, especially if their expertise as a character could be useful to the party in that moment. Another common mistake that I often see between party members is someone creating a party member whose interests directly oppose that of the group's. The most famous example of this is likely the thief that steals from the party. Yes, maybe this is what your character would do, but it's one of those moments where you need to think about, this is a game, we're all here to have fun, and it is not fun to constantly have to check if the other character is robbing you, and it just leads to real life fighting and overall bogs down the campaign with things that, one, don't really add that much and is only interesting like once. Obviously, this is by no means a rule or something that everyone has to follow, as there can be very rewarding moments where player characters may steal something from one another, but if your main goal in creating a character is just to troll the party, maybe you should think about rolling someone else. The last tip I'm going to give you today is to roll with your failures. And this means not only if you break character, just keep going, because it's a game, no one cares, we're not winning Tonys here, but also when you're physically rolling dice and you fail, you should have a reason for that. Explain to the party that you were distracted by something in your past that this whatever action made you think of, and that's why you messed up. If you get a critical success on something, explain why your specific past or something that happened to you makes you so good at that in this moment. It's these kind of dynamic, extra little details that bring characters further in touch with the campaign, and the campaign to be more entertaining and a better story for anyone who's watching. And that is actually going to wrap up our video on role-playing basics in specifically Dungeons & Dragons. Obviously, these tips can be applied to any tabletop RPG, but just using the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons, as that's what I'm the most familiar with. I would love to hear about any more tips you guys have down in the comments below, and as always, you can find my previous videos over here and over here. I'm RPGMD, writing your prescription on all things dice, dragons, and gaming, and I'll see you guys next week.